This is the North Georgia Life Podcast. Embrace life where you live. Welcome back to the North Georgia Life Podcast. It is Jake, your host, and today's episode we are talking with Patrick Neff with CarePortal. Now, you've probably thought about different things over the course of your life in terms of inventions and like, oh man, why didn't I think of that? I'd be sitting on a private island right now and it would be like one of my collection of private islands. So we've all had those moments. And this is an organization or a facet of a need in our world that someone thought of, hey, let's create a way to meet tangible needs in a very simple, straightforward fashion with some good check marks in place so that we're not being irresponsible and we're not being too much of a administrative hindrance to the good things that need to be getting done. And so what CarePortal is, we'll kind of cover through the podcast episode. As a kind of preface to the episode, I'm just going to ask this. If you are not inclined to the world of faith or church or Christianity or anything like that, there is still some really good practical things that this is going to just change your life and your world for the better, even if it doesn't come into the realm of faith for you. So I know whenever I have people on the podcast where there's any element of faith or God or anything like that, it's easy to skip the episode or tune it out or whatever. And this is one that I would just challenge that thought process to just be open enough to listen to what is being done in the community around you, because a lot of the people that are being helped in and through this organization are probably just like you. They're not necessarily people who belong to a church, profess any sort of faith at all. They're just people who need help. And that is what this organization is doing. Faith is not a qualifier for being helped by this organization, but it is how it started. And so to kind of neglect that part of the story, we would really be doing a disservice to where the roots and the origins started. But as far as thank goodness someone thought of a practical way of helping people who can't build a whole structure, put a brick in place. And that is what this is doing. And when we go through some of the things in the episode, I genuinely believe that this is one of the most tangible ways that all of us, whether you have $20 extra at the end of the month or whether you've got $20,000 at the end of the month, that this is a tangible way that everybody can grab a bucket of water, grab a brick to put in place, and start tangibly changing our community in our world by very, very practical things like helping families stay together. I'm telling you, this is one of the longer episodes because it was like, where do you stop talking about all of the good that can come from this? So you know how to find us online: Facebook, Instagram, North Georgia Life Podcast @gmail.com. If you have suggestions of organizations that are maybe doing something similar in another part of the North Georgia community, or just meeting practical needs in the nonprofit world that are outside of some of the national things that people know, or you see at a checkout counter at a grocery store. So that's an intro. Let's get started. Welcome back to the North Georgia Life Podcast. Today is going to be, I think, a really I don't want to say like a tangibly practical, inspiring, like all of those things at the same time. So we are with Patrick Neff with CarePortal, and he has a couple different job titles. So I'm going to let him give you his job title so I don't screw it up. So Patrick, thanks for being on. So.
Well, great. Thanks so much, Jake, for having me. And so, so I'm the director for CarePortal, the state director for CarePortal,
okay.
Which is a national organization, actually worldwide now. And then I'm the North Georgia area director for Promise 686.
Okay. And we had Promise, we had Jean Rector on last year or the year before, and she with Promise.
She is with Promise.
Yep.
She's an amazing gift to our organization, and she oversees a lot of the work that we do, especially here in the Hall County, Forsyth, and Gwinnett areas, and Region 2 area.
So you were just sharing with me you're what I call a transplant, like me.
Yeah.
You're originally from
Detroit.
Detroit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's crazy that we're landed down here in Atlanta, but I've been all over the country because I pastored for 27 years. I was a church planner.
Okay.
And so, but the last 35 years we've been in Lynchburg, Virginia.
Okay.
And was a part of a nonprofit up there for the last 10 years, and then we just felt like it was time to move and to do something different, and so we've moved down here to Brazelton, and then in the process, I did something that I told my kids never to do, and that's you tell our kids don't leave a job without having another one.
Yes.
And that's what I did, and of course my older kids, I got 7 kids, and so. My older adult children said, "Dad, you're doing something you said never to do." And so, but we moved down here, got connected.
You're like, oh, this is the advice you listened to.
Yeah, that's right.
This is what you remembered.
Yeah. Well, so the cool thing is that we had a connection with Promise 686, and they're an amazing organization doing incredible work throughout the state. Actually, Promise 686 is in 27 different states.
Wow.
But our headquarters is here, and so I came on as the North Georgia area director.
Okay.
Back in February, so I'm new.
Okay.
And kind of getting things going.
Yeah. So what drew you to this organization from the background that you have, or maybe it was the story of Promise 686? Most people don't know it's here, much less, like you said, it's headquartered here. It's not just here, it's headquartered here. And you said it was in 27 states?
We're in 27 states, yeah. We have affiliates and partnerships in 27 different states and growing rapidly.
So what was it about the organization?
Yeah, the thing that I loved about them, of course, I was for the last 10 years working for a nonprofit doing something very similar. But one of the things that I loved about Promise is what really is their commitment to mobilize the church to get involved in helping vulnerable children and families. And that's what I'm passionate about. Like I said, I pastored for 27 years. I absolutely see the importance of really getting the church back into the space of doing social ministry. For years, the church took care of the widows and the orphans, and then about 100 years ago, this thing came in called social services, right? And when that happened, the church kind of stepped back and just really allowed the government to step in, and really helping people became more transactional, giving them things, as opposed to really helping to transform them. And so I love Promise's commitment to mobilize the church. I've had great conversations with a lot of our government officials who really believe that their role is really transactional and protecting children, but it's the church's role to get in there and help bring transformation and build community. We don't change, Jake. We don't change our life unless we learn something different or we're exposed to something different. If we're not exposed to something different, we just continue right down the same path. And so that's what it just goes from generation to generation. We're finding now that the children that are coming into foster care are 3rd and 4th generation. In other words, their mother was in foster care, their grandmother was in foster care. And so what happens is you have this idea of you learn this process, and that's all you know.
That becomes the familiar.
And so your trajectory for your life or in your family and your generation never really changes until you're exposed to something different. And so we change in life because we believe something different. And so Promise's commitment to getting the church involved, and we do that through what we call FAMS. And FAMS just simply means Family Advocate Ministries. And what we do is we advocacy ministries. We put those in churches. We just help churches to say, hey, if this fits with your mission and you're passionate about helping children and families, and I'm sure you know, Jake, we've got a family crisis. We have in our country, we have a child welfare crisis as well, and so unless and really the church is the largest volunteering organization in the world, and so it's just kind of bringing those both together. And right now, one of the things we're seeing, not just here in Georgia, but all over the country, we're seeing a real, a lot of walls are coming down between church and government and saying, hey, let's partner together to meet some of these needs. And so that's where we move towards, is that transformation. How can we build care communities around families that are in crisis and help to change the trajectory of their life?
Yeah. Well, it's ironic and timely what you just said, because I was literally sharing this with a class I teach for new agents on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I shared this yesterday morning and went through so much of everything in I think in life in general, but especially when you're starting out, a new business, which is effectively what people are doing in real estate, starting their business. But I said so much of the core issue is the way you think.
Yeah.
It is your mindset determines everything else in your life. And I went through this, it starts with a thought pattern, and the thought pattern becomes a belief system.
Yes.
Because the thought pattern has just been on repeat long enough that you believe it. And the belief system becomes a habit, because it's been there on repeat long enough, and now it becomes a habit, and then the habit ultimately determines where you go in life. Yeah. And you think about, practically speaking, whether it's prayer or meditation, whether it's exercise, whether it's what you do in your free time, your evenings, your weekends, like anything. And I said, and we talked about in general, but specifically, some of the big, hot button issues in our world, in our culture and politics or whatever. And I said, most of the time, the division really is the thought pattern that someone has had or had reinforced to them over the course of their life.
That's right.
And until we understand, and this is where it drives me nuts, like what I see on social media and whatever. I was like, no one has ever had their deep-seated thought process, belief system changed by a social media post, ever. Like in the history of time, I don't think that's ever happened, because you have 20, 30, 50 years of a thought pattern that has been recurring, that has deep-seated in a belief system. And we all know social media is designed to just feed you more of what you believe to be true and further separate you from other people. But it's like the understanding of this person has had different life experience and different thought process that has been enforced, whether it's by them or by their environment. And I was like, it doesn't change in a day. It doesn't change in a year for most people. This is something, and part of what, in just my initial research of your organization, there's so many people that are just seemingly feel like they're just maxed out in life. They're tapped out. They can't, like, I can't devote another evening or weekend or day of the week in life. But those same people are like, but I don't want to do nothing.
Yeah.
And that's probably hopefully a good segue into CarePortal, because I think it's, I don't know whose idea it was, but it was genius of like, hey, let's get a practical avenue for people who have that, I want to do something, whether it's, whether they're evangelical Christians or whether they just like helping people, doing something in their community. It's an all skate. What's that look like for CarePortal, for you guys doing something into like just the practical walking out of what CarePortal is, and how somebody, if they're listening to this first time, they've never heard about CarePortal.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll go way back, just a real quick, little bit of history about Promise. Promise came out of a group of people from Perimeter Church, And began getting really passionate about helping people get into the space of foster care. I mean, adoption. And so they started, really, Promise 686 started off helping people get grants and creating grants for people to be able to adopt. And then from that, the process just continued to grow in creating an organization, a nonprofit that would help people in a number of different spaces. And so when we talk about FAMS, we lead into every community with starting off with FAMS. And FAMS is kind of like, if you, like on this table, or just think of yourself as having a box, and in it are a number of different tools that you can use. And when we go to a church, what we do is we really find out what the mission of that church is. And for those that are listening on our podcast today, that everybody's probably got a lot of different gifts, a lot of different desires, and some of the things we talk about today are going to hit some people, and other things will hit others. But in that toolkit are a number of different things. We have what we call care communities, and those are communities of people within a church, 5 to 8 people that will maybe gather around a family that's in need. We have primary care communities, and they're working with families a little further upstream that maybe they're on the verge of going into a crisis, and maybe their children potentially could go into foster care, or their children have been in foster care and those kids are now back home, and we can provide some wraparound services for them. But one of the key tools, you just mentioned it, and that we're getting ready to launch here in Hall County, is one of our tools in that toolkit is called CarePortal. And it's an amazing partnership that we have with CarePortal. Promise 686 is the implementer for CarePortal all over the state of Georgia. And currently we're in 13 counties, and we're planning on launching in 10 more counties. And Hall County is one of those counties that we're going to be launching on June 9th.
Okay.
And so we've connected with DFACS, and how CarePortal works. You're right. It's an amazing, ingenious tool for people to know about needs, and then be activated into helping and encouraged and inspired to meet those needs. So here's how it works. You might be living right here, and 3 doors down, you may not have any clue that a family, or maybe a couple streets over, or a neighborhood, or in a different part of the city, that there's a family that's in need. And that may go on for a long time. And so children's lives and families fall apart all around us, and we don't know anything about it, especially the church. But who knows about it? Only person who really knows about it is when they get to what we call the edge of care, and those children go into foster care. Then the government steps in and has to make some decisions for that family. What we want to do with CarePortal is provide a prevention tool that gets way up ahead and recognizes families that are being challenged, and give them the support and care that they need. I'll give you an example. I told you I have 7 children. 5 were adopted out of foster care. My wife and I have been foster parents for over 17 years. Amazing journey. And so I'd highly encourage people to consider fostering and open up your home if you have that capacity. But 4 of those children all pretty much grew up kind of in the same area, in the same part of the county, within a quarter of a mile of one of the largest churches that we have. And so those children's lives, I say they fell apart right under the shadow of the steeple, right? And the church, if you would have asked if they would help them, that family, they would have, but they didn't know.
Yeah.
But now that church is doing CarePortal, and they know all of the families in the community that are in crisis. And so what CarePortal does, we start off in a county, like in Hall County, we're working with DFACS to go ahead. DFACS is working with the family, or maybe they do, CPS goes out and does an investigation, finds out that there's a family that has a need. Now here's something that'll be interesting to your listeners, is most people think that when we think of a child going into foster care, we think immediately that there's been abuse. But that's not always the case. Around here, about 70 to 75% of all the children that go into foster care, it's neglect and not abuse. And neglect could be just being overwhelmed, or not having the finances to care for your child. Maybe their bed breaks, or their mattress it gets soiled, and or your wash machine breaks down. You can't wash your children's clothes. We had some kids potentially could have came into care because this particular child gone to school for 5 days in the same clothing. By Friday, the clothes were so soiled that the teacher could really detect that there was something going on, and so there was an investigation. The cool thing about CarePortal is when they got to the home, they found out that the washer and dryer was not working. So it's just a very simple thing. I mean, this is not a parent that hates their child or is abusing their child. This is a parent that's struggling and just does not have the finances and the capacity to go ahead and get a washer and dryer, right? Very simple. And there were some other things in the home. But when in the past, without CarePortal, let me tell you what would happen. They would have told that parent, you've got a couple of weeks to get a washer and a dryer so that you can take care of your children, or we're going to come back and your children could potentially go into foster care.
And by the way, you probably can't find them anywhere right now.
Yes, that's right. Or you have to order it, and it's going to take you 6 months for it to get here unloaded on a boat. But what happens is with CarePortal now, that need was posted to CarePortal, and within seconds, it's real time. So as soon as the caseworker, and she can do it mobilely on her mobile phone, she can punch that need in. She gets permission from the parent to go ahead and make that connection. None of the personal information is shared about that family, just their need. It goes out to hundreds of churches. Those churches see it, and people maybe have an extra washer and dryer, or maybe they're thinking of upgrading, and they say, hey, I'll donate my washer, I'll donate my dryer. And so a church hits that, says, hey, we'll meet that need. And so in a matter of like 72 hours, that family had their a new washer and dryer, and it kept a child from going into foster care. So, and that happens, Jake, that happens every single day with hundreds of different things. And so, and you can see the advantage. So if most of the children going into foster care are going in because of financial situations or just a family being overwhelmed, and we can bring the church alongside of them, this huge volunteer community, to assist and build a connection, it's making a huge difference. It's making a huge difference.
Yeah, because everybody, I think everybody, most people inherently know the foster system is drastically underserved, because for most people it's the commitment and all of the what ifs involved, and that stymies people into not doing anything. But if you realize that the volume of the kids that go into foster care, like you said, are not getting abused, like they are, some practical need is not being met. Like you said, clothing, it could be any sort of basic hygiene things, it could be simple things around the house. But if you have, especially my wife and I have talked about this numerous times over the last couple of years of COVID and everything. We're fortunate to have had the flexibility that if a child is sick, if there is something going on, like we can stay home for that day or for a day or two or whatever. But for most parents, if they're working, if it's a single mom or a single dad or anybody that's working a job, 2 jobs, 3 jobs, just to be able to keep the rent paid or keep the water on, now you couple that on top of what we just talked about, and it's like, well, what do I do? Do I stay home and attend to my child, or do I go and make sure my child can eat tomorrow? And when it's when it's stuff like that is some of the catalyst for kids going into foster care, like that's I dare say an easy problem to solve. It's not easy, but it's easier than all of the what ifs of taking the step of going full time into foster care, to say, hey, we could just have this app on our phone. Heck, you get notifications when somebody likes your Instagram account. This is a whole lot more practical and beneficial to the world around you than someone liking an Instagram post. So talk a little bit about or you can talk about whatever, but the some of the things that go onto the CarePortal and just how that goes.
Yeah, it really is an amazing tool. And there's a lot that goes in behind the scenes to make this so doable, so easy, and workable for the community that runs all over the country and now going all over the world. But how it really works is we try to keep it as simple as possible so that it's an easy onboard for churches as well as agencies that want to be requesters. So what we have requesters and we have responders, and then we have people that go out in the community and make the connection with those families. So the requesters are agencies, like right here in Hull County, DFACS is going to be our first agency. So we're working with them, and we train all of their workers on how to properly put in a request. And that request goes to a couple of people on their team, and it's validated. The cool thing is that a lot of people want to help people, but they want to know that the needs are vetted, right?
Yes.
You know, I pastored for 27 years and had a lot of people that I really wanted to help, but at 1 o'clock they would come to me and ask for $200, and then by 2 o'clock they were down to my friend's church 3 doors down that was and asking for the same thing from them, and that would repeat. And But all of these needs are needs that either DFACS or one of our requesting agencies have fully vetted. And so we know they're legitimate. We know that the needs in this family are legitimate. And then so they'll post that need onto CarePortal, and then it immediately goes out to the churches that have signed up. So let's just say a church signs up, said, yeah, we want to be a part of CarePortal. That church then signs really simple process, but creates a responder team, and they sign 100 people up in their church or 25 people up in their church, and then when that need goes out, all of those people get that request. And so it's very simple. They just get a notice on their phone. Hey, wait a minute. There's a family of 4, and a mom just got a newborn baby, and DFACS is requesting that we help get them some formula, or we get them a car seat, or we do a lot now with kinship. Kinship's really big. DFACS is really trying to move as many children over into finding their own biological families to help care for them. But a grandmother that all of a sudden at 65 and she's retired or whatever, all of a sudden now she's got her grandkids coming to live with her, and but she doesn't have car seat, she doesn't have a bed for this 5-year-old, and different things like that. So here's where we can come alongside and provide some tangible needs there for those families. So we help, we'll help the kinship, we'll help foster families that are getting a foster child. And I kind of went over it kind of quickly, but part of our overall FAM ministry is providing those care communities, which is very important to the families that we're working with. So not just supplying, like through CarePortal, the tangible need, meeting physical needs, but then providing circles of support, or what we call a care community around these families, and commit to journeying with them for a year. How cool could that be? To say, hey, with this kinship grandmother, that we're going to partner with them for a while. So how cool it is that in real time, the community, hundreds, sometimes thousands of people in the community immediately see that need, and then they have that opportunity to meet that need. And then the caseworker, once they commit to doing that, the caseworker makes the connection between them, the introduction between them and the family that needs it, and then they gather up whatever it is and take it out and go and make the connection with the family. And sometimes it's a one-time thing, but then sometimes I've been on some of those connections where those families get connected and can really build a community around them. And that's where we really want to go, because most of the people in life that struggle are socially isolated. And what socially isolated means they've either burnt all the bridges of relationships around them, or because of moving, or just, it could be a lot of different issues. They don't have people around them. We had a single mom that had 3 children, and she lost her job, and she was living in her car. So they were putting her kids into foster care. Kids still did go into foster care, and so and all of it happened because. So that's the end story. The backstory is something very simple. She had a job, but her brakes went out on her car, and she didn't have anybody around. Didn't know how to get them fixed. So all she knew was, I can't go to work. So she didn't go to work. She didn't go to work, and so she couldn't pay her bills. She lost her apartment, ended up living in her car. See, you see how it spirals out of control? So just one decision. So the point is that she was so socially isolated that she didn't have any way and no resilience. And we talk a lot about resilience. Sometimes people just don't have the skills to be resilient enough to overcome some of the challenge. Now, I'm sure if your brakes went out, you know how to get that to happen. And even if you didn't have the money, you probably have family that could say, hey, can I borrow $200 to get my brakes fixed? I don't want to lose my job. Most people don't have that, the families that we're working with. And so that's where CarePortal can jump right in. And it's not, and a lot of people think, well, I don't want to enable somebody. It's really not. It's really coming alongside of them. It's like what we talked about earlier. People will stay on the same trajectory of life unless something happens, unless they are introduced to something different. So I think probably the key word that we like to talk about, whether it's FAMS or CarePortal, it's meaningful relationships. It's building connection and building meaningful relationships. The things that move us in our life and change our life are new, meaningful relationships. And that's what CarePortal really does. So it's a great tool, and we're so excited about it coming to Hall County.
That's awesome.
I know all the county officials and DFACs, they're all really super excited. I've been to several meetings. But what we really need is churches to hear about this, and individuals to go to their church and say, hey, I'd like to be a part of this. And a church can get started with CarePortal it's really simple. It's just a matter of finding an advocate within the church that can build a FAM ministry and then utilize CarePortal as one of those tools.
For people who are either not connected with a local church or in an area, let's say they're in one of the kind of perimeter counties, and there's not a church in their county that's connected with CarePortal. Can those people still be involved in helping meet needs, and what's that look like?
Yeah, so actually anybody can get involved in CarePortal by going to careportal.org and signing up. You can become a kind of a community connector, getting connected with within the community. But we have people that are in other states that could see needs here in Georgia because they're all listed on there. And so we have people, actually we have a lot of people throughout the country that's their gift. They just love going on to CarePortal and meeting needs. So those are like our community champions. We also have businesses that do the same thing. So businesses and companies, we have organizations, we have in the past we've had a roofing company that they would get together and on Fridays, and he would match whatever his employees do. So they would pull it up they would see whatever needs are in their community, and the owner of this company would match and say, hey, listen, I'm going to match whatever needs, how much ever we decide to do, I'll match that today. And so they would do that. There's like their Friday thing of give back to the community.
Wow.
And so, I mean, I've worked with real estate companies.
Yeah.
I know you're into real estate. I've worked with real estates. I've gone to meetings and where they'll pull up the board and look at some of the needs and make a commitment to give to needs. It's a great way. So those are what our community business champions. Those are our business champions in our community. So we need those here that are willing to do it. So let's just say there's a need, there's an investigation to go out, and maybe a family has bed bugs, or maybe they have roaches, or they have something, and so it's unsafe. So we partner with other businesses like pest control companies that want to, hey, once a month I'll donate this, or I'll do this. Mattress companies, furniture companies. So a lot of different people can get involved, not just individuals, but businesses can become business champions and help us to meet some of those needs. Nationally, a lot of large, I told you I was from Lynchburg, and so Liberty University, and now there's a number of universities across the country that have jumped on board and said, hey, you know what, we want to kind of teach our teams, especially the football teams, and we want them to give back into the community. And I know Liberty University, the first year they did it, they raised $100,000, and when they got into their huddles weekly, they would pick something that they wanted to meet around the country, and they would meet that need. And it's so cool. So individuals can do it, businesses can do it, universities can do it, so it's an incredible opportunity. And you can see all of the needs, every need. And so if you go on to CarePortal, there'll be a map there. You can hit the word map, go down to the map, and you can click right on Georgia, and you can go right down and see the counties we're in. We're currently in 13 counties. My goal this year is to launch in 10 more counties.
Wow.
And then so we want to go wider and deeper. So our first county that we're launching here in June is going to be Hall County.
Awesome.
And pretty excited about
it.
It's just amazing.
That's awesome.
But we need churches too.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to have people that kind of give and help meet the need. So when an organization, let's say a business, wants to meet that need then goes to the connecting church that's in the community, and then that connecting church goes out and makes that connection and makes that delivery, builds that relationship.
Awesome. That's when you were talking about it, I was thinking, just kind of like we can't all build, the foundation of a skyscraper, but we can all put a brick in place.
That's exactly it. We can all do something.
Yeah.
I mean, we say that all the time around Promise, and we can all do something, right?
Yeah.
And that's the key. Every one of us can do something.
Yeah.
And it's not that you have to do everything.
That's right.
And
that's why so many people don't do anything, is because I can't do everything, and I only have, I feel like I only have 2 hours in the week to do anything, or we're thin on a budget, and groceries and gas and everything costs more, but we could do something. And I thought it was great that you talked about businesses, because you could have a automotive shop and just say, hey, we're just going to make a business decision, we're going to do one automotive thing a month for something related to the needs in the CarePortal that fit kind of our wheelhouse.
Absolutely.
And it's really not costing you a whole lot. You're not stretching yourselves too thin, but you're able to, it's all of these little things. So that whole many hands make light work kind of thing. Everybody grab one bucket. You don't have to put out the whole forest fire,
right,
but everybody grab one bucket.
Yeah, throw your bucket.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
What is, and this is probably an unfair question, what is the best thing or the most impactful thing that has happened, or that you've learned, or from your experience here so far? And we're only a few months in, but just anything stick out as far as a highlight so far?
Yeah, I think for me, and we just kind of briefly landed on it. I think sometimes when we look at the overall need, we talked about all the different things that's going on in our world today, and just the crisis, and just all the different stuff that we've gone through over the last few years. My heart is so encouraged, and I'm so inspired by seeing people that haven't quit. They haven't given up. They're still inspired to want to do something. They're still inspired. So there's this resolve inside of people to do good. When I put my kids to bed at night, and I don't want this to be offensive to all your listeners, but we're always challenging our kids to know who they are and how God and what God created them for. And so I always say, "Who created you?" And they say, "God created." And I say, "Well, how did He create? Well, He created me good." And I said, "To do what?" He said, "To do good and be good." And so the idea here is just, we want all of our kids to realize that, you've been created, you've been purchased for a purpose, and you've been created to do good. And so I think the things that has inspired me the most is seeing that in the middle of coming out of a pandemic, coming out of all the craziness that's around us, and looking head on at the challenges we have with children and families and the child welfare crisis. We see people, and their resolve is, hey, we're going to do something about it. Yesterday, I was in a meeting out in Haralson County on the other side of the state, where a community is coming together, and we're going to launch CarePortal in Haralson County. We're so excited on July 27th. And so there were a number of churches together, and it was so inspiring. We had 4 pastors stood up and said, hey, you know what, we're going to, 4 churches that were represented there that said, we really want to bring this to our community. And there's a lot more other pastors.
That's awesome.
I love it because people are getting it. And so I think when I moved down here from, of course, Lynchburg's a lot smaller, about 75,000 people. Moved down here, I passed 75,000 people probably on my way to work in about 20 minutes, right?
Yeah.
I think I pass about 500,000 people every day.
Yeah.
Well, I don't pass them; most
Yeah.
of them pass me. But on my way from Brazelton down to Norcross, an amazing drive, about 45 minutes to an hour every day. But I'm really encouraged that there's just a group of people, throughout our country, in our world today, that say, we still want to make a difference.
Yeah.
And that's what encourages me. And that's right where we are at Promise 686. If you want to make a difference, we're going to help plug you in and help you find your place to really make a difference.
That's awesome. Anything significant we haven't covered that you want to make sure we plug as far as CarePortal? Like we'll get at the very end, we'll talk about how people, find it, social media links, anything like that. But anything else from an organization standpoint we haven't covered?
I think probably going back to what we just talked about, a lot of times when something seems so big, we have a tendency to avoid it. But I heard one time somebody say, most of the things we accomplish in life we have to do in fear. I mean, if you're really gonna, come on, are you with me? So I mean, to go to the next level, to really make a difference in the world, and to overcome something that is so huge. I mean, to really make a difference, we're going to have to do some things in fear. And I think for a lot of people, this moves them outside their comfort zone a little bit, to think about doing something maybe that they've never done, maybe going and visiting somebody. But that's how things change.
Yeah.
That's how we make a difference.
Yeah.
That's how we inspire other people, is when we step up and we do something, even in the midst of fear. It's fearful to do something different. But so I think that's my biggest challenge is for churches. Most churches for the last 100 years have been used to not really going out, moving outside of their walls. I mean, most church growth has been, hey, what can you do inside your church to bring people in? And really the whole model of church growth is really not what you can do inside the church, but what you can do outside the church. Back in the early church, when they were living, most of the church was living under the Roman occupation. And one of the things that was practiced was a thing called exposure. And when the Romans didn't want something, they knew how to get rid of it, right? So if they didn't want children, or if there was a part of the population that they didn't want, they would take them outside, throw them outside the city walls, and they would expose them to the elements. And they did that with children. And these are historical facts. And so people would come by and pick those kids up and traffic it, and it's just, or animals would come, or they would just die because they didn't have food or anything. But it was the early church. It was the Christians that would go out and grab those children and bring them in and raise them as their own. And so we see that from, James 1:27, where we're called, to take care of the widow and the orphan. And so I think that getting back to that, like I said earlier, getting back to that is sometimes fearful. I mean, it creates fears. How do we get back to doing something that maybe we've never done before, and it's uncomfortable and it looks overwhelming? But if we step out, and one of the things I love about CarePortal and really Promise and the whole FAM model is we walk you through it. We're right there with you. That's our goal, is to come alongside and walk you with it, and to mobilize the church to get back into this space of helping children and families in our community that are in crisis. And we're seeing it happen. We're seeing churches really awakening. I had one of my last boss up in Lynchburg he says, I got one job for you to do. He said, I want you to wake up this sleeping giant called the church and bring them back into this movement of helping children and families. And it's slow, but it's happening.
Yeah.
And because I think God's given people good hearts to really want to help children and families. And we have an enormous need here in Hall County. And that's one of the things that I think that's super important, is to realize, I think we have, there's over 290, we have a lot of children in foster care and I don't have the exact number in front of me, but we have a lot of children in foster care here in Hall County and some of the surrounding counties, and there's just not enough foster families to take care of them. And here's an interesting fact that we've discovered at Promise 686. That is that if a foster family if a foster family has a child, and if they have a care community around them, 90% of them will still be fostering in after 2 years. That's an incredible.
Wow.
That's an incredible model. And here's how it works. It's because we're wrapping that family around and giving them the supports, the encouragement, and the help that they need. Whether it's helping them to pick up children, helping them to do respite, and this happens not just for foster families; it can also help for biological families, and coming alongside of them, having meals, committing to really walking with them for 1 year, and saying, "Hey, we're going to make a difference." And so we need a lot of foster families here in Hall County to help with this situation, but we also need not just those foster families. We also need church communities to step up and say, "Hey, we want to do a fam ministry around those that I call them. They're front lines. They're frontliners,
Yeah.
right? They're right out there on the front line of helping to change the foster care crisis." And so we step up and support them and help them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In this time in just our country and our world, after the last couple of years of you talked about isolation being such a critical part of the
really is.
the downfall, if I can use that term, of families, and the impact, and we've all seen it, whether you have kids or not, of our youth, our next generation, in the forced isolation to now you have people who are it's almost like a PTSD, like scared of other people because they've been conditioned to be scared of other people.
You're exactly right.
And now you throw your brakes going out on top of that. Like, I mean, you talk about a recipe for just the worst of the worst happening in our communities, and when there's practical things that can prevent that family from dissolving. But that's effectively what happened. The family is breaking up. The child or children have been through probably the most traumatic season of life in our country since I don't know, World War II maybe.
Yeah,
I mean, the
very
Depression.
traumatic.
Now we compound that with my mom or dad isn't there. You may or may not be with your siblings, depending on what the foster care need is. You may or may not be in the same county or the same school, with the same faces and friends at school. I mean, like all of those things. And it's just like, man, what if somebody just having a bed was what helped that not happen? Or
It's huge.
Or a roof repair, so that they didn't have to move out of their house or whatever.
So when a child goes into foster care, it's hard to get them out.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like a 6-month process by the time they do all the court appearances and the parents can make their case about that everything is back in place to get those children back in. Let me tell you, it's for a child, 6 months, even if it was 6 weeks, it's traumatic.
Yeah.
And it's something, so if we can do a lot of preventative work up front and really helping those families, it's a beautiful thing. And so really what we're talking about is just in a world that's kind of isolated us, being intentional about moving back to compassion, moving back to caring and being considerate and loving and being compassionate. And that's what our FAMs do. It's very intentional about providing care. And CarePortal is saying, "Hey, we see you, right? We see you out there, and you have a need, and we help these families."
Awesome. We're going to get into here in just a second how people get connected again, how they find you, social media platforms, website, all those sorts of things. little bit lighter thing I like to do towards the end of every episode is something called lightning round, which is a question that has nothing to do with anything. I said in one of the recent ones I did, I ask a lot of movie questions. I don't even know why, because I don't watch that many movies. But I ask a lot of movie questions about movies that people haven't seen. I'm going to assume that you have seen the Family.
Yes.
About foster care. Any highlights from that movie, as far as funniest part of the movie?
Boy, it's been a while since I've seen that. I mean, it was an extremely funny movie.
Yes.
Yeah, it really was.
We laughed harder in that movie than any movie we've seen. And that was, my wife and I we were like, it's like you're belly laughing and then you're crying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it takes you from one extreme to the other, and if it didn't have such bad cussing, I wanted my kids to see. You know what I'm saying, right?
For a TV version.
Yeah, they could have a TV version, but it is true, and I think that really captures this whole space. Mm-hmm. Like I said, we have 7 children. 5 have been blessed to be adopted out of foster care, and they're in this space. You have times where you're laughing, and it's just incredibly funny, and just some incredible stuff. And then there's times that your heart is just so broken. And I mean, I just love the transformation that took place in that family. Right? I mean, it started very gently, and then, it was like, whew, it all kind of came on at one time. But I think the key there is that they were open and they stepped into space. Now, we just got done talking about do it afraid, right? Sometimes to really have an impact, you're gonna have to do some things afraid, and they really stepped into that too. They leaned into that. It was, it's fearful. Hey, where is this going to take us? Where is this going to lead us? But that's where dreams are made for these children that don't have anybody. And I think about all the foster families and adoptive families, people that have done things on CarePortal, the people that are serving other people that are serving through our care communities. They look back and their lives are enriched because they leaned into something. And was it easy? Not always. Sometimes it's hard, but it creates a great benefit. And I think that movie kind of showed that as well.
Yeah, so. If you haven't seen the movie, it's just, it's got a little bit of language, but it's a great story. And it's one of those things, at the end of the movie, they go through some of the statistics of the foster crisis in the country, which I appreciate the people who put the movie together, bringing light to some of those things. And when you look at that at the end of the movie, it is so overwhelming.
Yeah.
But that's where this is such a good, okay, we can't, we can't turn back the ocean here, but we can get a bucket. And that's the beautiful part of this, is it's so tangible. It's not obligatory, so it's not like, well, hey, you hadn't done anything this week, like, come on, cough it up.
Yeah.
It's as you can and as you're able, and it's so versatile in terms of options that it's literally like we can all do something somewhere. So
we all can. I think that's the key. We can all do something, and every little part leads to the big part being accomplished, and it all helps to resolve and create a benefit for children and families.
So how do people, let's give people practical things. How do people find you again? Social media links, any other connection points, platforms, anything?
Yeah, so I think probably the easiest way is to go on to our website and be able to gather information. So with Promise 686.org, and CarePortal is the same. So it's just careportal.org, and you can sign up there. The other thing is, if we have listeners out there and they're a part of a church and they want to get their church involved, I'd be glad to meet with them and help to connect their church and find out, hey, what might be some possibilities for you to get involved. Now, individuals can sign up like we talked about earlier, but we really like to try to get the church connected in the process. So, I mean, I can give my, if people want to email me,
my email, whatever
My
information.
email is very simple. It's just pneff, N-E-F-F, at promise686.org. And so they can contact me there, send me an email, and I'd be glad to maybe answer any questions that they might have, and start a conversation.
Cool. Awesome. Patrick, this is great. This kind of thing is part of the whole reason that this podcast exists. So I appreciate your time. I know you got other stuff to do today, so I won't keep you any longer, but thanks for taking the time and sharing.
Well, Jake, thanks so much, we just appreciate the opportunity to tell what's happening here in Hull County, and so if everyone would continue to remember, June 9th is going to be our launch. It's going to be right at the DFAC's office over there off of I think it's McEver Road.
Yep.
And so if they would like to come to that, like to be a part of that, please reach out to me. I'll be glad to give them some information.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick.
This is the North Georgia Life Podcast. Embrace life where you live.